Welcome to episode 206 of Thrive by Additive-Free Lifestyle. We're Tracy and Jo, and we're two sisters who are really, really passionate about asking questions and seeking information on things that make us curious. This is a podcast show that will help you lower your toxic load, guide you through various stages of life, and give you permission to ask questions and seek advice on topics you may not yet understand. Today's episode is brought to you by our Additive-Free Lifestyle app, which you can find on all major app stores. Download it today to create family meal plans, easy shopping lists, and have handy access to additive information, which is really, really useful for the topic we're about to talk about, right, Jo? Meat. Now, there are so many additives that can be added into meat, and we dive into a few of them, not a lot, but a few of them today. But today's episode was more about the farming practices and understanding some of those stickers that we see stuck onto the front of meat packets, like grass-fed, grain-fed, hormone-free, etc.
Yep, super interesting topic. And I think it's one that we all need to understand, because the meat industry is, did he say $1 billion industry? And
That would make sense.
I think he mentioned that. And we should know where our meat is coming from, and we should be aware and curious enough to understand what you're looking out for. So not just where it's from, but also the marketing that comes with it as well.
And I think as a society, we're really passionate around Australian made, Australian grown, all of those things. And we do like to support the farmer. And this was a really good insight into how much better we can do that when we understand where our meat is come from as well. So I loved that a few topics that we talked about was that. And then also the seafood industry. So we dive into that a little bit as well, because they also sell wild-caught seafood. Now, just be aware we have a discount code for anyone for ButcherCrowd, and that'll be all on our show notes as well, which will be over at episode 206. Go to our website, additivefreelifestyle.com/podcast 206, and you'll find the links to that discount code. And they often have other promos on top of that. So I know when we got our meat, it was $100 worth of meat we got given in the first couple of orders, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yep.
But
exactly.
they often have different promos. They're a really great company. We love supporting them, and enjoy.
Damien, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast show. How are you?
Hi, Jo. Very well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
That's good. All right, we're excited today. I think we're going to learn a lot about the farming industry in Australia. And if you just want to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and what you do, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Damien. I'm co-director and founder of ButcherCrowd, alongside with my brother, Rob. Together, we started the business a bit over 3 years ago now. It was Australia's first paddock-to-plate home delivery service, I guess, including wild-caught seafood on a national scale. So we deliver to 96% of the Australian population, and it's continued to grow. There's obviously demand out there for people wanting to know more about what's in their food and that story of where that food's from.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Important. I love that. We grew up on a farm, for anyone that, or you probably don't know, but for anyone else listening that doesn't know. And I love that we get to connect back to the food that we eat through businesses like yours, because it is really important to understand where our food comes from.
Yep.
And especially with meat, because there are some practices out there that maybe aren't so great. And we probably don't need to talk about the really bad. But what sets ButcherCrowd apart from other meat, like other farmers? So you don't farm the animals yourself, unless you do. I'm not sure, because I know that you get meat from various farmers as well.
That's right. Yeah. So we're from a farming background. Our parents had a cattle property in North Queensland, and we still have family in the industry up here as well. Well, I guess it starts back a little bit like, how do we get into this kind of position in the first place? And that kind of tells the story of why we're here. And the reason is that we identified pretty early on, like some years ago, that what we grew up with was really hard to find in the supermarket. You go to a supermarket, it's like, where's this from? I know it says, these things like grass-fed, but what does that actually mean? And I know exactly what grass-fed, grass-finished means, but a lot of other people probably just look and see grass-fed, like well, what's the difference between grass-fed and grass-fed and grass-finished? So there's all these layers that I could see that the transparency wasn't clear. And we thought, you know what, we both have, I've got 5 daughters, so my brother's got all the boys, I've got all the girls. So, it's important about what we deliver for our children as well. So what's in the food? And we weren't able to have a conclusive answer for that. So we really withdrew, come back and said, we've got to step back to our roots. We know we can source this. How do we go about providing that on a scale for the general public? And that's what we set about doing. So it was that driving motion of going, okay, we know what's in our food. We're happy with it. And if we're happy with it, I'm sure other people would be happy with that as well. So that's where we kind of started with the story. And that's why we do what we do, is to be able to source from farmers now, not so much ourselves, because we can't provide that on a level where we could provide for mums and dads throughout Australia, right? So what we do now is we onboard farmers who have aligned values. And what that means is that all the meats are for beef and lamb, it's grass-fed, grass-finished, no grain whatsoever because of the ruminant digestive system. And then for our poultry, we got the pork, chicken. It all has to be pasture-raised, free range. So the pasture-raised is a big part of that. All products are antibiotic and hormone-free for used in growth promotion, and there's non-GMO products as well. We're further looking into the carbon neutral certification, with some products being that at the moment, and that's something we're working on as we migrate down that path. But essentially, it's the knowing what's in our foods and where it's come from. And we onboard those farmers that have those aligned values. We then are able to provide that on a delivery schedule, I guess, to 96% of Australia's population.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers there. So
yeah,
I hope
no,
that's
Oh, sorry. I was also going to keep going down that path of something that is also, again, having grown up on a dairy farm, is how much you get paid, right? So there's sometimes a big gap between what the supermarket sells something for and what the farmer has actually been paid. And so I'm assuming, as someone as well that's been a farmer and it's still in your blood and in your family, that's really important to you guys as well.
It is. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, people work hard. We want people to be paid well and looked after. So they continue to do that. There'd be nothing worse that people give up and walk off the land and say, you know what, it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
So, and then what kind of a position are we going to be in then? That's scary. So we're all about supporting the Australian farming and fishing families, because obviously the wild caught seafood is the other part. So most certainly that by our business model, we're able to remove the middleman and source directly from the farmer. Now, what that enables us to do is to pay them more than what they would have received from, let's call them the large corporates, what would they be offering normally. So by dealing direct, we're able to source a higher quality product, pay them a price that they deserve. And it also then goes back into those communities. So normally the farmers will use their local abattoirs nearby in their little communities, which then flows through to them as well. It's not all about these big corporates. So by that model, we're able to help those, not only the farmers, but the communities that are associated with those farming families as well, to be able to source them and provide those products to the Australian people.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, so good. We used to have a butcher come out onto the farm. So we would have someone come out and kill the cow that we would raise. Poor little cow, big cow by the time we ate it. And I don't know. I just, growing up as a kid, I kind of just thought that's what people did. I was so naive to think that, anyway. And then we would have someone would hang it, and then the butcher would then come out. And I remember it as a day, we all had to help pack a chest freezer full of meat. And now my kids, they're city kids, they would never, oh my gosh, my son would be absolutely horrified if he ever had to pack up a cow. So I want to touch on a lot of things, but first off, I want to touch on grass-fed and grass-finished. What does that mean? If you could break that down for us all.
Sure. I guess grass-fed would be what all cattle and sheep are, right? It's their digestive system, that their diet is primarily consists of grass, so they are grass-fed. Now, the big difference here is that when you walk into a particular shop and you see a label of rump steak and it's got grass-fed written on it. Yep, of course, it's going to be grass-fed. It's a ruminant digestive system. It primarily consists of grass-fed. However, the key difference is what it's finished on. Now, if we could pause that topic of grass-fed, right? So at the end of that stage of that animal's life, there's two deciding pathways in which way it can go. Either continue on a only grass-fed diet its entire life, so it's grass-fed and it's then finished on grass, which is what ours is, or it then pauses its grass-fed life and then sidesteps to be incorporated into a grain-fed diet for the last sort of 50 to I don't know, 120 days or so. Now, where that occurs is in the feedlots. So for that to occur, they're on a truck into a feedlot and they're fed grain purely for that period. What that does is they put on a lot of weight very quickly, that grain. So obviously that's for the benefit of, we're paid, well, the farmers are paid on a, well, depending on where they're buying it from, but cattle are sold on a per kilo basis. So the heavier they are, the more money's made.
Mhm.
Now, there's a whole discussion group and there's arguments for saying why that some people prefer the flavors, etc. That's a whole different topic. But from our perspective, it's about what's right for the animal. It's a ruminant digestive system. It needs grass. That's it. We don't believe in giving grain. So when you see grass-fed, yes, all cattle and sheep are grass-fed, but the important part and the question that needs to be asked is, what is it finished on? Is it finished on grain, or is it fed an entire diet of grass? So that being grass-fed, grass-finished, or the other wording for that would be 100% grass-fed. So that both those words are the same. But you'll note that a lot of places don't actually conveniently mention what it's finished on. It just says grass-fed. So it's a bit of a ploy in marketing, but we support purely grass-fed and grass-finished, no grain.
And because
Okay,
I imagine
so-
being locked away in a grain shed for the last 120 days of its life is not ideal for that cow either. You know, that's 6 months of the year.
No.
And we need to respect where, these animals are giving their lives up for us to eat them. So having that respect there as well for that animal to finish its life off in the most humane way.
Correct. And that's roaming out on pastures as as nature intended, not so much in this confined space. There's no grass, there's very little shelter, bare minimum for it. And the other part of it is that's the external environment, right? But then the internal going on inside their body of consuming these copious amounts of grain. There's a lot more methane caused by this. There's a whole their actual bodies aren't designed to incorporate grain as a complete diet like that. So yeah, it's very, very layered. Then you've got the transport of to and from and all those things as well, which is extra layers again.
It's cruel,
You can
isn't
talk
it?
all day about this.
No, I love it though. I love the conversation. It's good for us to know and be curious about all this sort of stuff.
I guess the big takeaway for it is that when you're buying something, and if it's important to you know whether it's got grain or not in it, don't just assume by what's on the package. Ask the question, what is this finished? Is it finished on grain, or has it had a complete diet of grass?
Yeah,
Don't just assume because it's got grass-fed.
And that's not just for cows either. Is that for sheep and other
Sheep as well.
animals too? Just cows and sheep?
Yeah, it's their digestive system, and that's the reason being. So, like, take a chicken for example, right? It has, like their digestive system's different, so they can actually incorporate grain. Like a bird out in the wild will actually peck and eat seeds, grains, etc. So do chooks. Chickens do as well. They'll forage and they'll eat seeds and grain that are available to them in the wild. So they have a little what they call a gizzard in their tummy, so that can actually break down those grains. So that's the difference. Whereas cattle don't have that, neither do sheep, being a ruminant digestive system. So when you think of like, oh, I don't want any grain at all because that's not right for the animal. Well, for a ruminant digestive system, i.e., cattle and sheep, that is true. But a chicken, for example, is able to actually eat grain in its natural form as nature intended. So we're not exclusive with that, but particularly for cattle and sheep, yes, that most certainly no grain at all.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you use to supplement in the case of maybe a drought or something like that?
Well, for us, all our beef are from, and this is one of the reasons why we've chosen Tasmania, is because that there is no supplements required for in terms of grass down there. Like it's a very heavy rainfall area. We source purely from an area of Cape Grim in Tasmania. But if it needs to be supplemented, that's the farmer's way of managing that. And there is a program that we're actually part of, a never ever program, which is no grain whatsoever. So regardless, even if that be the case, there is a free drought or whatever it might be.
But hay
there's
is
still no
okay.
grain.
Like hay is actually grass. It's just it's dried grass.
Yeah, it's dried. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not grain. Yeah.
But yeah, not grain, but just hay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I spent many years carting hay.
Me too. Kicking off the back of trucks. And, yeah.
I would have to drive the tractor. I wasn't strong enough to throw the hay up.
Okay, so next on my little list of questions here is hormone free. We see that one a lot in, like, you walk past most butchers and they've got a sign saying hormone free. But like, what are the kind of legalities around that? Like, I feel like it's just thrown around a lot.
Well, it's a funny thing, right? If you read hormone free, that actually kind of insinuates that it has no hormones. But we all have hormones in it, so do the
Yeah.
animals. So it's not actually hormone free. I guess so when you see that, it's the questions like, why are they saying hormone free? Well, they actually do have hormones, but I guess the point they're trying to highlight is that maybe they haven't had hormones put into them for growth promotion, which both antibiotics and hormones can be used for, to put on the extra weight, obviously, to obtain a high yielding price at the end of the day.
But it's a big one in chicken, isn't it? Like, to beef them up, make them bigger.
Growth prominence, yeah. Antibiotics are actually banned in chickens, and they have been for a little while. But there is still, I don't know the legalities of where that whole industry is at as a whole right now. There is a lot of change going on, but I know with us, and that's why I'd rather not comment on what other people are doing, because I don't know exactly what they're doing. I know with us, it says. I remember I'd go to my grandma's place and we'd have chicken spaghetti, and we'd have to catch the chickens, slaughter the chickens, pluck the chickens, gut the chickens, break it up, and do the whole thing. Now, I knew exactly what was in those chickens. The chickens we source today remind me of the flavors of those days, and it's exactly the same. So the farmers we have are exactly that. There's no antibiotics, no hormones that are used for growth promotion in any way or any form. They're natural. They're out there foraging in the paddocks. I literally had a talk with one of the farmers earlier this morning, about some of the aspects of like the eco shelters they have set up, how they go managing against predators and stuff like that. We could talk all day about the chickens as well, but so there's a lot with it. The industry is probably getting better, I'd like to think, but I know for certain with us that there is a guarantee that does not exist with ours or any product.
And it does taste different. I do agree with you. Like, it's beautiful and it's juicy, and it might not be as big as what some people are used to, but that's actually the way that it's meant to be.
That's
And
right.
my husband recently, I asked him to get some chicken from the supermarket that I'd ran out of yours and your box was on its way. And I actually couldn't eat it. It was
Yeah,
so
it's different.
stringy, and
Yeah.
like, I almost felt like dry reaching, because I just knew how bad it was, and it wasn't right. Like, it wasn't good. Well, I would like you, if that's okay, to do touch on the chickens
Sure.
that where you get them from, because I think it is important for people to understand that they shouldn't be locked up in a shed. And I understand that, like you said, with predators, eagles, and different things taking, chickens away from free range. But yeah, if you could touch on that a bit more, that would be
Cool.
great.
I guess another part of where we're aligned is that we want to raise the animals as nature intended. That's one of our mottos, right? And what that means is to be able to give the animal the freedom and the space to be able to move, exhibit their natural tendencies. And for a chicken, that would be to roam, forage in the wild, bugs, insects, whatever it might be that they're able to find and eat. Funnily enough, though, the chickens are a herd mentality, right? A flock mentality. So they don't venture out one on its own away from the flock because they've puts itself into a position of threat from predators, etc. Right. So what we have to actually do is actually train the chickens to actually venture outside of these echo shelters that we provide. So when at a young age, and by the way, they're really slow growing too. They're like from the time when they're hatched to the slaughter, it's about 120 days versus like 35, I think the standard average in the industry is. So
30 days, a month. Wow.
35 or 40 days, I think it is. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but the interesting part is that their natural tendencies, you actually have to train them to forage and to leave, right? So if you've never given these birds this training, they never would. So what our chicken is it's pasture raised free range. So pasture raised is the foraging part where they're able to move and peck and forage, all that sort of thing. By being able to provide that, the animals then, that training, they then are able to just move around freely, exhibit their natural tendencies, live a life as nature intended. That would be versus a standard free range bird without the word pasture raised, right? So what that means then, if they're a free range chicken, and this is the big difference between our pasture raised and free range, is that free range are given access to the outdoors. Now, the big word, are given access to the outdoors. Doesn't mean that they're out there roaming freely. And now think about that mentality that I just mentioned about these birds. If they're not trained to exhibit those tendencies to be able to explore, being a flock mentality as well, if one bird doesn't leave the coop or the big factory shed they're in, they're not all going to follow, and he won't go out. So it's the chicken and the egg again. Who goes first? Never been trained, but if you do, that's not part of your DNA. You're a flock mentality anyway. So you find that a lot of these birds don't venture out and roam freely like in the pastures, like a pasture-raised chicken would, which means then, so where do they get their diet from? Well, primarily their diet is provided within these shed-like systems that they're raised in. Now that feed, I don't know what's in that feed. Similarly, organic chicken, if the only difference with organic chicken is that they're like certified organic free range chicken means that they're still in that same system. They're not pasture raised, but the diet they're given is organic diet. So that's the only difference. So when you start looking at the humane treatment of these animals, is that really humane? Just because it's certified organic, does that mean that it's actually a humane life for that chicken? I'm not going to say yes or no for that, but I don't personally believe for us it's not. So that's why we're aligned with the pasture raised.
I was going to ask you about that because we see organic beef, but they could be organic grain finished beef, and then they're classed as organic beef, and you're paying top dollar for this organic meat that's actually not really that great after all.
And it's been in a feedlot for 120 days, So exactly, it's don't get me wrong, organic's a great certification, and we endorse all those sort of things, but it's just not aligned with where we are. We find that there's areas of where we are, we feel surpass that labeling, and therefore we're in the no man's land. There is no certification to say that is better or worse, whatever it might be, but we know what's important to us, what we grew up with, and that's it. We're aligned with that. And there's a lot of people out there that are aligned with that too.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Yeah. Okay, Trace, I'm taking over.
Yeah,
well, I want to talk about the wild caught fish, because this is actually really, really hard to get in Australia.
Unless you live in Tasmania.
If you could share with us the juicy information about fish.
Yeah. Well, we the wild caught seafood is we grew up in North Queensland, so we have access to that here as well. Obviously, the Great Barrier Reef's on our doorstep, so we're fortunate with that. Similarly, we grew up going fishing with family and friends. So having that access to those kind of products was a given. It's only when you step outside that circle and realize that not everyone has access to that, then you realize the importance and the significance of what others are missing. So that was why we incorporated that into the model. We source our wild caught seafood from Australian fishing families here in Australia. So there is one exception, is the salmon, the wild salmon that we source, which is from Canada. Now, the only reason why that's the only imported product we have. The only reason being is that all Atlantic salmon produced in Australia is farmed in Tasmania. So farm seafood is not aligned with where we're at. Hence, we didn't want to incorporate that, but we wanted the salmon for all its benefits that it has. So we've sourced that from Canada, and we bring that in, and that's wild salmon from wild sockeye salmon from Canada. Outside of that, everything else is Australian wild caught seafood. Now, I guess where we source that from, mostly off the east coast of Queensland, down as Mooloolaba, that kind of area, Sunshine Coast, and also the Northern Territory as well, and the Gulf of Carpentaria of Queensland. So it's kind of the Queensland coast, the Gulf, and Northern Territory, the northern parts of the country. The barramundi, etc., that's all from the northern parts. Goulburn snapper, etc., and we get the rest off, southeast Queensland. So,
Okay, is it pole caught or is it scooped?
so there's actually depends on the species. Obviously, prawns are net. They're all like trawled by trawlers. The prawns. Barramundis are wild caught. They are netted. Some parts of those. They're also the Goulburn snapper. They're like a cage. Forgotten the name. They're like a trap, I guess you'd call them a trap. So they're actually a trap, which is actually a really good way of catching them, and that's the best way to preserve the product. You can imagine if they were trolled, for example, as opposed to being trapped. Right, they're in the bottom of a net. They've been dragged around for 2 to 3 hours. They're actually quite stressed, so you'll see that in the product, and that it's not as good quality, and that's why we've gone away from that method to have them as a trap fish as opposed to being a trolled. Yeah, there's different variations with that.
Having them trapped as well, there's going to be less damage to the rest of the fish population. Because you see on the TV, and I know that they can hype things up and make things look worse than they are, but I know the farming industry, the fish farming industry is horrific. And, what it's doing to the ecosystem down here in Tassie in its certain little area that it is off the most amazing island down here called Bruny Island. That's where
beautiful.
most of them are, and it's basically destroying this area. It's actually horrendous. So there's that part of it. But when we catch things as well in the wild, we also want to make sure that we're not, advertently catching dolphins and seals and all the other animals out there that tortoise, turtles and tortoises and things like that as well, that are obviously a vital part of our,
And that's exactly why we've gone to this method for the trap as opposed to the troll, to take into those factors into consideration. And to be honest, the governments are very well organised, and the quotas that are put in place are very. I mean, the whole argument is that we're not going to have fish for everyone forever, but that's actually not a valid point. If you actually go through, I've got a pretty strong background in literature and laws and all that sort of stuff. So we're very up to date with all the current legislation that surrounds the fishing industry, and it's actually in support of the fishermen that the way they're managing them is doing very, very well. There's species that are growing back. There's numbers are strong, and it's backed off scientific data as opposed to just opinions of saying that if we fish, we're going to have no fish. Well, that's actually not true. If you actually go through and do the work and spend some time researching, you'll find that that's actually not true. So the management in place is actually quite good as well, and to support a continuation of wild caught seafood being sourced. Of course, you can always find an angle to say and disagree with that, but if everyone's got their own angles, I guess, and the reason why that they'd push for that, particularly with the farming background. I totally agree with you that we personally don't like the farm seafood side of things for A, the product of what we're putting into our bodies, but B, the destruction that goes on in providing that. It doesn't make sense. So hence why all our products are 100% wild caught.
And it's just getting bigger as well, which is mind-blowing. Like the goal that they have for 2030 is quite scary.
I was reading something the other day, and a little bit off topic, but it was like, they feed them all these byproducts of animals, but it was like for one kilo of fish to be grown, that they had to provide something like 1.5 kilos in food or something over a certain period of time. It was kind of like counterproductive if you looked at it. They had to. Yeah. Anyway, I digress, but yeah,
No.
yeah. Anyway, it's sort of aligned with where we are anyway. So
Yeah,
I
no,
know,
it's all relevant.
I've seen the color chart. What would
Oh,
you
yeah.
like your salmon to be colored? We'll put it in their food to see how colored it can get. And yours is it actually is a little bit orange but grey, which is really what wild caught
That's
salmon
right.
should be. And also, I was advised by your team that when you cook it, to undercook it, because otherwise it
That's
can go
right.
quite dry.
Yeah.
And it certainly was a different way of cooking. I did overcook it and it was dry. But yeah, it was interesting to actually
It-
see the
mm,
difference between farmed and wild.
How bad is
yeah.
this?
Yeah.
So I can't get the salmon here in Tassie because of the fish farming industry. So I'm allowed to
know.
buy all the other fish that you sell, but I'm not allowed to import the salmon because even though it's frozen, it's cryovac, it's obviously safe. Well, anyway, I'm assuming it's safe to import, but the fish farming industry have said no because it might destroy the fish farming industry.
Yeah. I'm not sure of their reason, but it's a state legislation
Yeah.
requirement for quarantine. Yeah. Which
Yeah.
one can assume that maybe that's probably why. Which is sad. 'Cause we have a lot
Really
of customers
sad.
saying we don't want to eat that. We want to eat yours, but we can't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
I just go
Which
without. I
that's
refuse to eat it.
on the mainland, and yeah, it's a bit sad. I know.
Mm. Okay, well, I think that was the main questions that I had written down here. I thought maybe we could touch a little bit on methane, but I think that might go a little bit off track because that's such a huge topic as well with the vegan industry and the methane that's coming from animals, etc. But I I mean, I'm probably going to get shot here, but I feel like as a human, we do need the protein from the meat industry. I know my body likes it, and I think
Yeah.
that there is a lot to be said about the vegan industry as well. Not that I'm against that at all, but there's so much to weigh up, isn't there? Like, I think that farmers cop it from this angle, these people cop it from that angle, and at the end of the day, if we all just did the right thing, there probably
Mm.
wouldn't be so much of a problem.
Mm. It's
Yeah,
how it's all
totally.
farmed, isn't it? Like it all comes down to the farming practices and what we do. And that's actually the end of the story. Like if like you said, if the soy farmers are doing the right thing and growing their soy correctly, and the meat farmers are doing their right thing and feeding them the right foods, we're all living
The
on the same.
fishermen are catching the right fish and not all the other, turtles. Like, if we all just did the right thing, we'd be okay.
Yeah.
That's correct. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the other important part is respecting other people have an opinion, and that's okay.
100%.
It's okay to have different opinions. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It's just everyone has a different opinion, and depending on what knowledge you have as well. And like you said, as long as everyone's doing the right thing, which aligned with, that's where we're proud of being in that space. Yeah, we can all coexist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
100% agree. The thing that we can do as consumers, though, is buy from the right people. And so you guys are doing the right thing. And so our job now as consumers is to do the right thing by buying from the right people. And I know that we are absolutely loving ButcherCrowd. The other thing that I love about you guys as well is that you don't put nitrates or the synthetic sodium nitrate number 250 in your bacon. And also your pre-packaged sausages and burgers are preservative free as well. So they're sulfur number 223 free, which is excellent. And they're quite hard to find as well. And they're really yummy too. So that's even like a tick as well.
Yeah, no, we're pretty proud of that. That's the whole, having a clean product. I'd call it clean, with free of preservatives or additives, etc. Nitrates. It's free of everything. It's just like our burgers are just 100% pure beef, and that's it. Brisket. Our salmon burger patties are just salmon. Sausages. There's no preservatives. There's no nitrates. Bacon, no nitrates. Nothing.
Yeah, I overcooked the salmon burgers too. I'm gonna have to get some training on how to cook salmon, I think. But no, it's such a great product. And is there anything else that you would like to add? I know I've learned a lot, so thank you.
No, I guess that's the big part is like, yeah, knowledge is power, right? The more you know, the more you understand, and helps you guide to make a better decision for your own health, for your family's health, and for the farmers, for the animals, the environment, the entire thing. It's one big picture here. So I guess the big part would be to educate yourself. And you guys are doing a fantastic job on that. And we're really privileged to be a part of, what you're doing as well. You've obviously got a strong voice and people respect you, the position you guys have. So thank you for being with us. It's our pleasure. So.
Thank you.
Oh, thank
That's
you.
really kind.
I was just thinking that like some people might look at your prices and go, oh, they're a little bit more expensive than what I'm used to. But when you know now the effort that goes into why, then you're happy to pay that extra couple of dollars. And I don't believe that you're actually really much more expensive than the supermarket anyway. And also, I find that you don't need as much. Like my husband, when the brisket got cooked in the slow cooker, it then like went really small. And he's like, oh, is that going to be enough? But it did actually feed the four of us. And you don't actually need, as much. And something that we do as well, it's like if we're making a bolognese, we'll use 500 grams of the mince, but then supplement with some lentils, and like we might put some organic. I have to completely blitz them so that no one sees them. But, I'll bulk things up with this beautiful meat and then some vegetarian to make it sort of a bigger dish as well. So I guess I just wanted to say that for people who might be thinking, oh, it's a little bit more expensive than I'm used to. There's other ways to get around it so you can still eat really, really good produce and afford it as well.
Yeah. And I guess there's lots of layers with that too. It's all, the farmers are being paid well for a premium product. It's not a product that you can get from a local butcher or from a local supermarket. It's just stuff that is hard to source. So we take care of that for you. The farmers are paid well. And you can know that the animals are being treated well, the environment's been looked after, and then it's delivered with the convenience to your door. So there's a whole different layers of why that price may not be what you see in a supermarket. It's because it's a different product.
Absolutely. I don't think it's much more anyway.
Yeah, I don't find it any more expensive, and I can buy the Cape Grim being Tasmanian. And I don't find it any more expensive, and I will go out of my way to support a farmer any way that I can. So I think a lot of our listeners are in that same realm as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. We've absolutely loved chatting to you today. And we will share everything on this in the show notes, like Joe said, and we'll put all the details in there. But thanks again for coming on our show and sharing all that with us.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's been great.